Hello, everyone. My name is Victor. I am the occult technician, and this is Mind War, episode 10. That's right, folks. We've made it to 10 episodes. I appreciate all of you being here with me. Your support has been very motivating, and it keeps me coming back. In this series titled Mind War, I'm considering this as season 1, where we are working through the book titled Mind War by Dr. Michael Aguino. Mind War was written as a global strategy for peace. We are taking the tactics of Mind War and we are applying them to our personal lives in order to overcome some of the situations that we deal with on a daily basis. Right? The goal of Mind War, not only on a global scale, but also on an individual scale, is what we call the Aristos. And that is the best possible scenario for our current situation. We often find ourselves in situations that we cannot change, but we may be able to change the scenario. We may be able to make things just a little bit better in our current situation. Even small improvements will, over time, lead to positive growth and healing that will allow us to change the situation overall. And that's a very powerful tool. Again, to people who look from the outside, this may seem like magic. They see you change overnight. But what they don't realize is that you have been implementing small changes in your life that have slowly added up, and they just finally recognized it. Right? Much of the work that we do in healing ourselves, as we've talked about before, can be done covertly. Right? Do it behind the scenes. Don't announce to everyone all of these major changes that you are planning on doing in your life. When you do, you're often going to be faced with just an additional amounts of pushback, right? If you're already in a bad situation, if you're already in a abusive relationship, no matter what type of relationship that may be, the last thing that you want to do is to announce that to your abuser that you are going to make all kinds of positive changes that are going to stop them from being able to abuse you. Right? If you do that, all they're going to do is turn up the heat. Maybe make some of these changes quietly, covertly. And eventually, people will start to recognize that. And then you can propagandize them with the new situation that may be arising. Because in the end, they're going to heal whether they like it or not. So we left off on page 183. This is the beginning of chapter 7, where we are going to discuss phase 1 of the Mind War campaign. In the last episode, we talked about phase 0, which is kind of going in and assessing the situation, deciding whether a Mind War campaign is even going to be initiated. Is it viable for the current situation, right? If things are so bad that you may simply need to say, listen, I'm not even going to participate in this situation. I don't want to get involved, right? But often we find ourselves forced into situations that we really can't get out of. So that is why we focus on the best possible scenario for our current situation. In phase 0, we've looked at the situation, we've evaluated things, and we decided, you know what, we do need to have a mind war campaign here. We can change the hearts and minds of those around us to create a better world. Whether that world be the individual world around you, your home, your workplace, your community, or on a larger scale, as we take those global tactics of the book Mind War and apply them to our personal lives. Mind War Campaign Phase 1. To win 100 victories in 100 battles is not the acme of skill. To subdue the enemy without fighting is the acme of skill. Sun Tzu. Defeat is a state of mind. No one is ever defeated until defeat has been accepted as a reality. To me, defeat in anything is merely temporary, and its punishment is but an urge for me to greater effort to achieve my goal. Defeat simply tells me that something is wrong in my doing. It is a path leading to success and truth. Bruce Lee. A. Redefinition of the problem. Mind War Phase 1 is the redefinition of an assigned conflict in terms of an acceptable and practical outcome. The United States Armed Forces are not accustomed to foreign involvements leading to anything less than complete destruction of the assigned enemy. A mind war campaign begins with the elasticity of outcome, a solution which is the best possible under the circumstances, the aristos, though it may not completely satisfy any participant in the conflict. The aristos may well justify medals, but probably not triumphal parades. The nascent physical war halted in Phase 0 is characterized not only by its covert mischief, but also by its official misrepresentation, if not outright denial. Attacks and invasions take place under monikers of peacekeeping, stabilization, or assistance, either U.S. unilaterally or under the umbrella of the United Nations, NATO, or coalitions. This evasive labeling fools no one, but adds to the general confusion in that neither actors nor goals are openly and clearly acknowledged. And since they aren't, no one knows what the physical war goal is, how to determine whether it's reached, or even who would make such a determination. It's often that confusion that we find in the fog of war, right? So those who are conducting the battle, who are orchestrating it, right? Think of the conductor of an orchestra. They use this terminology in order to further confuse people, to placate people, make them more placid, I think is the word for it, right? More accepting of the atrocities, the horrors of war. We use this kind of politically correct terminology in order to dull the senses as we move through physical war. But in mind war, again, one of the goals is to take that truthful look at the situation, no matter how difficult it is to accept. B. Declaration of mind war. Mind war begins with a formal declaration of mind war, which includes a definition of the problem and identification of its participants, as well as a proposal for collective victory, the aristos. Ideally, this should happen in the Congress, per a formal declaration under the Constitution's Article I-8, although in a post-World War II era, the unending physical war actions, both overt and covert, Congress has largely abandoned this responsibility to the presidency. The introduction of mind war gives Congress an excellent opportunity to reassert its authority, since mind war is a humanitarian solution unlikely to generate the domestic political emotions and pressures caused by physical war actions. Quite the contrary, the citizenry is likely to stand predominantly, if not unanimously, behind such an forthright approach to an international problem. Another benefit to a formal mind war declaration is that it signals to the situation country that its internal conflicting groups that the United States as an entity is committed to a mind war solution. It is not a house divided in which an ostensible mind war campaign may be undermined by a continuing covert physical war won. It also informs such participants that what general solution the United States has in mind, so that it can begin to discuss its effectiveness and acceptability among themselves. The physical war alternative, obviously, promotes only indeterminate death and destruction. Assuming, however, that it will take some time and some evidence of less formal mind war success before Congress is emboldened to this formal extent, U.S. Army mind war itself must define its mind war mission and sell it progressively to the Army, the Department of Defense, and other concerned governmental departments and agencies. This is rather less daunting than it sounds, since such external governmental entities are generally willing to give mind war enough rope as long as they are not responsible for a failed campaign. Mind war, as previously discussed, is completely prepared for the possibility of failure, although, like Bruce Lee, it regards obstacles as incentives to rechart the path to the aristos. You can get there from here. The idea of providing some truth and clarity and being open about situations that the United States wants to get involved in, being honest with the citizenry, saying, here's why we're doing this. That's refreshing. Being able to provide factual information without propaganda muddying the waters would be nice, right? But these things may, at this point in time, just be a hope, right? We could maybe get there one day. But again, that's not the current situation. So we have to, again, find that best possible scenario. And maybe as individuals, that simply means gathering enough factual information as we can from multiple sources to help change the hearts and minds of those around us. Like we talked about in episode 9, if you have that very political family member who is constantly being agitated by the news, maybe taking some time to find alternative news sources that can be trusted by that member and say, let's take a different approach at gathering information, one that's not so volatile, one that's not so full of heated rhetoric and propaganda. That you may be able to convince them that they are still going to be able to get the facts and the information that they require, but they can do it in a way that's less emotionally charged. C, diagnosis of the disease. The symptom of physical war is military or guerrilla action by or within a situation location. There can be many reasons for such eruption of violence, and often several simultaneously. Livelihood hardship, fear of harm, whether from the government, invading, occupying forces, or guerrillas, anger from experienced harm, religious fanaticism, individual or sectarian political ambition, territorial greed, and or involuntary imprisonment. So some of those situations there that they just talked about are going to be very difficult to overcome. If you are the victim of some type of harm, it's going to be very difficult to not want to get revenge on those who harmed you. I am in no way saying that revenge is not a virtue. In fact, I think it is. Right? As you've seen through much of my other social media, through my other posts, my videos, never forgive, never forget. That is a theme of mine, right? And that often means, still focusing on those things that have harmed us. The purpose is so we are not harmed again, right? So it can be very difficult to overcome those things. And I'm not here to tell you to turn the other cheek. That is not who I am, and that is not the gospel that I preach. What might initially startle conventional intelligence officers and strategic planners is that the mind war diagnostic procedures below are conducted unclassified and completely in the open. It is essential to the accuracy of all the steps, as well as the final foundation diagnosis, that as many of the individuals, groups, and organizations included in the diagnostic sweep be made aware of it and have opportunity to both critique and contribute to it. This reflects the mind war principle that a successful mind war campaign must be waged by all participants against inertial physical war pressures, and that the only true mind war victory is a collective one. So very simple. Making sure that everyone is brought to the table, everyone who is a part of the situation, everyone that is either contributing to or being affected by the problem. Bring everyone to the table, hear them out clearly, and allow them to be part of the process of creating the aristos. It's the best way to get everyone's buy-in. It's the best way to get everyone contributing and involved to the success of the mind war campaign, right? Again, on a personal level, this is taking the time to gather information, understanding of each of the individuals in your life that are adding to the problem, that are adding to the difficult situation that you may find yourself in, gathering that intelligence on each of these people, understanding their emotions, what makes them tick, understanding what is upsetting them, what is triggering them, right? And as you work together, as you openly put these things on the table together as a team, you can start to dissolve these issues. You can start to dissolve the things that are being used to attack you, these weapons, these tools that are being used against you. Again, not physical weapons, Hopefully you're not in a situation where you're being physically attacked or abused, although some of you are. Being able to take a look at the psychological tools that are not only being used against you, but those tools that are being used against your abuser, right? You may be able to help your abuser stop being attacked. Think about that. If the person who is harming you in whatever way this may be, if you can help them from being harmed as well, maybe it can create a cycle of healing. So from the list here, number 1, internal diagnosis. Before evaluating a U.S. mind war response to a specific situation, the mind war strategist must identify all contributing irritants in the absence of any U.S. interference whatsoever, and create a profile of the situation location accordingly. It would be convenient if such irritants could be given neat numerical weights and plotted on a mathematical matrix, but this is impossible due to their fundamental dissimilarities. What is possible is to rank them in rough order of their influence. For instance, in one country, religion may be the dominant aggravation, while in another only a minor consideration. Internal national policies, customs, or issues such as race, non-national ethnic groups, gender status, civil rights, which may indirectly bear upon physical war brinksmanship, must also be identified and ranked. Such a gradient is completed for each participant group. When the group with their rankings are placed side by side in a lineup to compare motivations and their relative influence, similarities and strong influences suggest what a mind war campaign must emphasize in order to succeed. If the situation location exists in complete isolation, which in most situations it does not. That internal diagnosis, right? Taking a look at the current situation. What is it we're actively dealing with? Okay? So, a personal story. When I was younger and I would use alcohol on a routine basis, basically drinking beer after work, what I would often do as a routine is come home, and the very first thing that I would do is drink a beer. That would set off a chain reaction of continued drinking throughout the night. Now, this didn't cause a ton of trouble in my life. It didn't cause a ton of problems. I wasn't a rageful person after drinking. I was actually more a life of the party, having fun. People seemed to enjoy being around me. But ultimately, it's not good for anyone, right? For the person drinking or those involved, right? Or those people around them, family and friends. And what I realized one day, I came home from work and there was no beer in the fridge, and I just drank a giant glass of water. And it hit me that day. When I come home and reach for a beer after work, it's not because I want to start drinking. It's not because I want to get drunk. It's not because I'm addicted to the alcohol. It was simply because I was thirsty. I was dehydrated when I got home from work. And that one simple change, that one small internal diagnosis, created a massive change for me in my life. Instead of drinking from the moment that I got home, I would often wait multiple hours till it was much closer to bedtime, right? I ended up drinking far less than I did in the past. Not only was it better for my health, but of course I was saving tons of money. I was being a cooler, chiller person, and life overall, for not just me and my family and friends, it started to become more peaceful for everyone, right? Things may not have been as exciting and flamboyant and rambunctious as they used to be, but we were able to adjust to the peace and enjoyed that more than the party. Number 2, external diagnosis. The next step of diagnosis is to simply identify and rank all external influences bearing upon the impending or aborted physical war in which the situation location is engaged either internally or externally. This must be done for each foreign country whose policies or actions contribute to the physical war momentum, as well as for involved non-national organizations or enterprises. Again, a ranked lineup is created and a weighted picture generated. At this level of analysis, care must also be taken to identify whether specific foreign countries' interests are aligned or antagonistic to one another. In short, the situation location may actually be an artificial proxy for a much larger indirect contest. During the Cold War, many wars of national liberation were regarded by the capitalist and communist blocs as showcase tests of their worldwide power and prestige. Such views were not necessarily shared by the local client regimes or movements. Vietnam's Ho Chi Minh, for example, was first and foremost an anti-colonialist who admired and cited the American Declaration of Independence. Only when he perceived American support for the post-World War II restoration of French colonialism did he turn to the Soviet Union and China, allies with whom his regime maintained an uneasy and mistrustful relationship, exploding eventually into Vietnam's 1979 war with China. An obvious danger here is unconscious analytical bias in favor of the United States and or its favorite international clients, or against countries, blocs, or non-national groups or influences perceived or imagined to be hostile to the U.S. diagnosis, must be objective and dispassionate if it is to be accurate. During later mind war phases, applicable biases and agenda can and should be acknowledged and faced, but never in phase one. So again, back to my story about drinking after work. One of the external diagnoses that you can do with drinking was, for me personally, and again, you can do this yourself if drinking is something that you are adding into your mind war, right? Looking at those external influences on drinking. For me, my best friend lived next door. We enjoyed drinking together. We loved putting on some music and sitting on the porch, hanging out in the front yard, maybe playing darts in the garage. Very basic things, right? And we would often goad each other. We would also, often promote each other's drinking. That's one of those external diagnoses. Taking a look at those external forces in our lives, which are not necessarily antagonizing us, but promoting us into doing things that are going against that aristos, right? It can be difficult to do, especially with friends, right? But it's something we must do in order to achieve that aristos. We have to look and take a very clear look at our current situation, right? Can't lie to yourself, folks, right? You can lie to others, but don't lie to yourself. Number 3, a composite diagnosis. Once both internal and external lineups have been completed, they are combined into a composite whereupon overall common factors are identified and ranked. While this stage of analysis may begin with a simple diagram, it cannot end there, because this is the stage at which mind war situation, location, population analysis comes into play. Strategic research and analysis teams from all 3 mind war branches must consult towards an aristos path, which not only participant leaders, but the affected populace may agreeably and realistically tread. So again, the scenario that I talked about, you made plans with your friend after work, right? Hey, we're gonna barbecue together. So the first step that you do is your internal diagnosis, and you decide, I'm gonna drink a glass of water when I get home instead of reaching for the beer. And then when you get to your friends, or they get to your house and you start the barbecue, maybe you say, I'm gonna wait and have my first beer with dinner. Or maybe say, tonight, I don't want to drink beer. Maybe I'm going to have a cocktail after dinner. With dinner, you have iced tea or water or juice, milk, whatever, but you find an alternative, right? And again, these things, you don't have to say, hey, buddy, I'm tired of drinking so much. I'm trying not to drink. Your drinking is bothering me. Your drinking is making me unhealthy. My drinking is making you unhealthy. Let's quit, attacking alcohol and all of those type of things. That may not be the correct way. But by making some of these simple changes based on the composite diagnosis, you've looked internally and found that that initial beer simply is the result of being dehydrated. You look externally at those influences of, hey, when I'm hanging out with my buddy and we're barbecuing, we promote each other drinking. I'm just going to set up a few small time frame obstacles. Again, I'm not going to drink until we're having dinner. I'm not going to drink until after dinner, right? Those type of things they seem like small changes, but again, it's a better scenario for your current situation, which are going to lead to positive changes. Number 4, analysis expertise. Formal area and country studies abound within the various departments and agencies of the U.S. government, as do published books, periodicals, and running contemporaries in the commercial media and internet. For a mind war diagnosis, the RNA teams must cast their net as widely as possible. Again, taking care not to exclude or discount facts or points of view which the United States might find politically, economically, or emotionally inconvenient or repugnant. Again, taking that clear, honest look at your current situation, you might uncover some things that are difficult, that are emotional, that you don't really want to deal with, that you don't want to have to address with others. In the beginning, don't address them. Don't attack them head on. Take time to gather the intelligence around those different situations, right? Around those external factors, internal factors. Allow yourself to digest them first and understand them. Come up with different changes that you may be able to make to those external influences without arousing too much suspicion. Number 5, foundation diagnosis. Finally, the mind war RNA teams. Sorry, folks. Let me take one real quick. Finally, the mind war RNA teams produce a comprehensive diagnosis which, once articulated, will be the foundation of the consequent mind war campaign. This foundation diagnosis is the source to which all operational elements of the campaign, mind war branch, metaphors branch, and parapolitics branch, will constantly refer to ensure the coordination and success of the campaign. It is a dynamic, continuously updated resource, not a static document. So that's very interesting when you are doing your intelligence gathering, when you are taking that time to take a real clear look at your situation. Write those things down. Write your goals down. This is the mind war goals scenario. What is the goal of this mind war? Why are we fighting it? Why are we trying to implement these changes? What is the purpose of all this? What is our mission statement to why we are fighting so hard, right? And that mission statement can change. It can be updated as the scenario changes, right? Maybe the situation itself hasn't changed, but the scenario is changing. You've made some positive forward movement. So now that those initial issues have been dealt with, maybe we add some additional ones. What is our next step? Where do we go next? But we are constantly going to be referring back to that mind war mission statement, that mind war foundational diagnosis, right? What is the original diagnosis of our situation? The internal diagnosis, what we're dealing with internally, the external diagnosis, what are we dealing with that is coming from the outside world into our situation, and then that composite diagnosis. How do these different forces interact, and how can we manipulate them into a positive, progressive change, right? D, prescription of the cure, the aristos. The foundational diagnosis, if correctly done, presents the present profile of the situation location and provides indices which can be used for short, medium, or long-range forecasts as well. Any one of a number of social, political, and economic forecasting techniques can be applied to the foundational diagnosis, but these will only indicate the situation location's future if the present destabilizing influences which have caused the physical war environment are left unchanged. It is the purpose of a mind war campaign to change them in such a way as to eliminate the threat of physical war and ensure a stable, constructive, and endurable environment. The word peace is intentionally not used because it may be necessary to continue the formal state of mind war significantly past the initial elimination of violence into correction of the imbalances which could otherwise lead to its return. Formal mind war victory is declared when the situation location can be left to function completely without it. That Aristos, that cure, folks. You may be dealing with multiple ailments, okay? You might be dealing with multiple different issues at the same time. Just because you have provided a cure to one doesn't mean that everything is cured. You simply are going to move on to the next one. And you are going to continue addressing each issue until the mind war patient is cured and can be left to thrive and survive on their own. Number one, the mind war campaign goal, we've been saying it through this whole series, folks, is the Aristos. From the foundational diagnosis, the mind war branch strategists develop a goal for the mind war campaign. This goal represents the most practical, quick, and universally endured changes which can be made to the foundational diagnosis in order to alter its profile to one of non-physical war stability. Thus, this goal is called the Aristos, the ancient Greek term signifying the best for a given situation. The Aristos is not ready-made. It does not present itself from the foundational diagnosis, because the foundational diagnosis is merely a profile of the unaltered situation and a means to forecast from it. The Aristos is an intrusion into the foundational diagnosis inertia, an adjustment of it to alter it. If the foundational diagnosis is done correctly, it will not be easy to alter it in a manner which does not risk unexpected ripple effects, some of which could engender new instabilities. For this reason, the correct Aristos will be one which stabilizes the problem situation with minimum disruption to the foundational diagnosis. Again, when we go in, when we diagnose our situation, when we gather the intelligence, figure out the truth of our current situation. What is our current situation in our personal lives? Where are we living? Where are we working? Who do we live with? Who do we work with? What issues are they causing to us? And what is causing them to be agitated against us, right? A lot of those things that may be agitating those who come against you is not a result of anything you're doing. It's external forces to them that are getting them agitated and upset, and they are simply passing it on to you, right? So again, one of those things we need to do, that clear foundational diagnosis, getting a clear understanding of what we're dealing with. Then we can address those situations and we can work towards the Aristos, right? Number two, flexibility of the weighted rank factors. The diagnostic process produced ranked diagnostic factors which combined with analytical expertise led to the fusion of the foundational diagnosis. The next step towards the development of the aristos is to evaluate each factor in terms of how quickly and easily, if at all, it may be changed. Once the quickest and easiest possible adjustments are identified, the question becomes which combination of these would suffice to stabilize the problem situation most easily, practically, and economically. We're going to look at the different factors. We're going to rank them in order of which issues are being brought into our lives that are the most destructive, that are causing us the most problems, versus some of the smaller issues that are maybe not causing these big issues in our lives, maybe not causing so much trouble and problems in our lives. But these smaller things might be able to be addressed as simply saying, here are some successes. We've had a few successful battles, right? We may not have won the mind war yet, but we're winning a few of these battles, and that will grow our confidence to face the bigger issues. Number 3, open access evaluation. In physical war, opposing sides plan their strategies in secret, seeking to surprise, deceive, and disadvantage one another. Since each side is necessarily working with an incomplete and distorted picture of the situation, intelligence, the attempted acquisition of information an opponent wishes to conceal, is essential, and inevitably with incomplete and imperfect results. The consequence is a physical war campaign of misunderstandings, mistakes, blunders, and excesses, the sum total of which does not, indeed cannot, lead to a rational resolution of the conflict. In mind war, the process leading to the foundational diagnosis is not only not classified, but is advertised and open to all conflict participants. The enemy is the physical war conducive situation, not any individual or group caught up in it. While the foundational diagnosis is initiated, developed, assembled, formatted, and disseminated by assigned U.S. Army Mind War Strategic R&H teams, access to and suggestions regarding their deliberations are actively, constantly sought and welcomed. Situation participants not only have the most direct and convenient access through electronic media, but are invited to visit the Strategic Mind War Campaign headquarters to meet and dialogue with the Mind War planners themselves. The result is a foundational diagnosis as complete and undistorted as possible, and an emerging aristos, which is neither a surprise nor an emotional confrontation to anyone involved. If a less than ideal solution were sprung as a surprise by one side in a conflict, the odds for its acceptance would be reduced by the opponent's pride and resentment of a dictated ultimatum. If, as in mind war, everyone takes both the credit and the blame for a tolerable, if imperfect aristos, such emotional coloring is minimized, possibly completely avoided. So the idea of welcoming your enemy to the table prior to fighting and saying, here's the situation that we're in, right? So before we pick up arms and attack each other with the purpose of killing each other, let's look at the common issue between both of us. Can we, here at this table, before things get worse, can we come up with a solution? Can we come up with an aristos, the best possible scenario for our given situation? Can we do that? Can we work together for some type of solution that is going to be the best for both of us, right? Where we both come out, maybe not on top, maybe we don't get everything that we want, but it's better than the alternative, which is destroying each other. Again, can we do these things in our own lives? Can be difficult. You have to address these things very carefully. You don't want to sit down with someone who is close to you, just kind of out of the blue, and say, here's the following issues that I'm having with you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And here's how we're going to solve them. Are you on board, yes or no? If you catch them off guard like that, they're just going to be defensive. So, again, we're taking some of these tactics here, and we're trying to figure out, how do we address these issues with the people in our lives? Number 4, acceptance of the aristos. Before the Mind War campaign can be activated on the basis of the foundational diagnosis and its emergent aristos, all situation participants must agree that it is acceptable. This is, of course, much easier if they have been involved in the process from which it emerges, and that they were thus able to propose and evaluate alternative solutions. Planning participants, however, are not the only ones who must agree to the aristos. Each side must present to its superiors, subordinates, and general adherents and secure their endorsement and cooperation. This will usually be tentative and reluctant, because that is the nature of an aristos. As the Mind War campaign proceeds, acceptance of the aristos should solidify. If it begins to dissolve, it is a sign that the aristos was wrongly formulated and needs redefinition. So, not only do you need to gather intelligence about your current situation and really diagnose what the issues that you're facing are, then once you've come up with a vision of the aristos, presenting that to those people who are in your lives that may be causing these issues, okay, getting them to buy into it and working towards it, whether that's covertly or overtly, right? The author here is saying you do it overtly. But again, like we've talked about before, you may need to, before you address any of these issues, start to make small incremental changes to yourself. Allow those changes to provide positive feedback to where the person that you're going to address some of the larger issues with, they see those changes in you. And they say, wow, this person has done some things to become better themselves, right? I'm now open to hearing some of the ideas and suggestions that they have for changes that may affect both of us, not just them. Okay? That's one of these tools, that's one of these tactics that we can use to not, shock in all those people in our lives, in our personal lives, into the changes that you're making as an individual, right? Trust me, these are lessons learned, folks. I've learned these lessons personally throughout my art, throughout my videos, everything that I've been doing over the last 2 years. I was very excited as I've been learning. I still am today. I'm excited to be here doing this. But every step of the way, I was sharing that excitement with everyone in my life, even before I truly understood what I'm doing. And this has been almost, at the beginning of next year, it will be 2 years that I've been doing this work. The art, the magic, the gateway experience, making these videos, creating the characters, right? I would not have 2 years ago been able to tell you this is my goal and this is what I'm planning. To be doing what I'm doing right now, sitting here, creating this, I guess this is a podcast or show, right? This series. This was not on my list of things to do when I first started this work. When I first started my work on January 1st, 2022, when I took my first DIY batch of psilocybin and listened to the first Gateway Experience tape. I simply was trying to heal. Heal my mind, body, and spirit. I had been for too long waging a physical war against myself and those around me. And it was time to heal. That was my only goal at the beginning of this, right? And today it has grown into not only healing myself, but helping others heal. Again, if you're out there, if you're listening, if the tactics that we talk about from this book, Mind War, are helping you, and you have stories and ideas that can help others, please let me know. Right? Contact me, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, X, email, whatever. I'd be glad to share your stories with the audience, right? I hate to even say audience. That's not really what it is, because we're all in this together, folks, right? I'm just as much in the same situation as you are all in. I may be at a different phase. We may be facing different issues, but we are all in this together. Okay? All right, so we're going to, with our remaining few minutes here, we're going to move to Chapter 8, Phase 2. In the province of connected minds, what the network believes to be true is true, or becomes true within certain limits, to be found experientially and experimentally. These limits are further beliefs to be transcended. In the network's mind, there is no limits. John C. Lilly. The war was an unnecessary condition of affairs, and might have been avoided if forbearance and wisdom had been practiced on both sides. Robert E. Lee. Once the foundation diagnosis has been initially formulated, as it is a dynamic, not a static document, and the aristos determined, Phase 2 reverse engineers that aristos from its achievement to the present situation. The purpose of this is to identify what changes, in what sequence and or combination are necessary to attain the aristos. Before we go on, what the author is saying here, again, this is a global strategy for peace, right? He's talking about this in much larger context, because we are addressing these tactics on a personal level. What he is saying here is that we are now going to imagine that the aristos has been complete. We are going to imagine a situation in which all of our issues have been addressed, and we are all equally happy with the aristos. Okay? Where have we talked about using that imagination? Through magic. We use our imagination to create illusions of the future and then manifest those illusions into reality. Okay? That's all he's talking about here. First, we have to define what the situation is and the issues that are in it. Then we have to define what the aristos is going to be, the best possible scenario for our current situation. Now we are moving on to phase 2, which is imagining that aristos, that those solutions have already been put in place, our issues have already been dealt with. We are there as victors together, everyone involved as winners. Everyone comes out on the winning side. And now, through that imaginative process, we're going to say, how did we get here? Now that we are visualizing success in the future, how did we get to that successful point? Right? And often just through that process of imagination, that's where the magic occurs. Because we think outside of our current negative situation. We are often caught up in this reoccurring, replaying negative mindset that keeps us in the negative situation that we're in. But once we take the time to visualize ourselves outside of that negative situation, all of a sudden your mind is open up and allows yourself to receive the solutions for dealing with those issues. If you continue to think in that negative mindset and never visualize yourself being successful, you close yourself off to those positive solutions that will come to you. They're there, folks. Everything that you need is inside of you. It's inside your heart. It's inside your mind. It's just about how we think about them. And the author here is saying we're going to visualize ourselves being successful. And through that success, we are going to we're going to reverse engineer, we're going to work our way back and figure out each step to address each issue to get to that successful Aristos. As each such change is identified, the assets, forces, and resources necessary to effect it are specified. If for any deficiency the change is deemed unachievable, the reverse engineering seeks an alternative path around it to the foundational diagnosis. If no such path can be found, the Aristos is unattainable, as presently defined, and must be revised less ambitiously until a practical path to the foundational diagnosis is achievable. The problem situation cannot, of course, be relied upon to remain static while the Mind War campaign's incremental changes are being applied. As each change occurs, the foundational diagnosis must be updated accordingly, along with the reverse engineered and now presumably shorter path to the Aristos. Another consideration in all social engineering is the law of unintended consequences, by which any change, or even the existing situation per se, may mutate suddenly and unexpectedly due to unforeseen events, such as assassinations by key individuals, crises in nearby environments, or natural disasters. Such surprises do not automatically dismantle the Mind War campaign, but they must be absorbed into it and compensated for when they occur. The result of Phase 2 reverse engineering is a map to the Aristos, which all Mind War operational elements must follow if proper coordination is to be attained and the Aristos realized. If the map is constructed correctly, its success will be inevitable, because it is based not only on the physical situations and conditions, but on the mechanism of the minds of all the humans involved. It is this later feature of the Mind War campaign which distinguishes it from a conventional relocation of resources analysis, such as is both commonplace and useless in international disputes. In Mind War, the psychology of all participants is the missing key, which not only makes the campaign possible, but makes its outcome inevitable. So, that law of unintended consequences. We can look back to that scenario again where you're living in a household with someone who is very political. Their politics bring a very dark and heavy and negative environment. It creates a negative environment. They're constantly watching the news. They're constantly being emotionally agitated. They're trying to agitate everyone around them, okay? So in that scenario, you take some time to say, hey, the news that you're watching, you bring them some articles or some books that explain how the news that they're watching is propaganda, how it's manipulative, and say the person recognizes that. Now, that political person then decides to find a new source for the news, right? A new source for this um, now lack of agitation in their life. If you're not careful and if you don't provide them with a peaceful alternative, maybe saying, okay, we're going to go back and we're going to find some more middle ground news sources, or I'm going to provide you with some books from people in the past that have talked more about peace and common sense and things like that. Instead, this person in your life now goes from watching the mainstream media to now the dark recesses of the internet, to where they're getting even more extreme propaganda. They're getting more agitated through the insanity and the lies and the manipulation that hide in the darker recesses and the darker corners of the internet. And now you have an unintended consequence of that person who you were trying to, calm down a little bit with regards to their political insanity. Now you have simply moved them to an alternative news source that actually agitates them even further. So again, this is why we visualize these things. This is why we do this planning. This is why we have to try to be multiple steps ahead of these unintended consequences. We map these things out and say, if we make this change, what are the consequences of that change? What other things in my life are going to change, right? And we have to be careful that we don't do things that are so sudden and so big that they end up just, wiping out any positive forward movement because of the unintended consequences that come with them, right? So I know we just started into chapter 8, phase 2, but we're going to leave it there for this episode, right? Again, I appreciate all of you being here. The goal of working through this book, Mind War, is to take the tactics of a global strategy for peace. We're going to apply those tactics to our personal lives. We're addressing a lot of techniques and knowledge bases that we may not have ever researched. We may have never tackled any of these ideas before. So some of it's probably new for a lot of you. It's nothing to be afraid of. It's okay to learn these new things. It's okay to say that we don't understand them and have to go back and research and do a little more digging. But that's what we're here for. We're learning, we're practicing. And again, if you're out there, if you're implementing some of these tactics in your own life and you're seeing success with them, or if you're seeing failure, let me know. Let's work together as a community, right? We can come together, help each other. Because if as individuals we begin to heal, it's not just me. I'm not just down here healing myself and then leaving the rest of the world to be chaos, right? Through my healing, that's why I'm doing this work, hoping that you'll heal also. Because it will become infectious. I know that sounds strange, but healing can be infectious, right, folks? We can do this together. It's going to take some time. It's going to take some work. There'll be successes and failures, but we'll do it together. Again, I really appreciate you being here. Sincerely, your friend Victor, the occult technician.